City commissioned consultants present report on the Social Development Plan. The Regent Park Social Development Plan, commonly referred to as the SDP, is a key framework guiding the neighbor's well-being through a focus on social inclusion and cohesion. The current SDP structure revolves around 4 working groups related to community-identified needs around employment, safety, community building, and communications. The working groups generally meet monthly to plan and implement action plans and activities. The working groups are supported by a planning committee that meets weekly and various other subcommittees. The planning committee and working groups all report to the stakeholders table that meets quarterly. Participation on the working groups, planning committee, subcommittees, and stakeholders table are open to everyone, including TCHC residents, market residents, City of Toronto staff, representatives from TCHC, Daniels, and Tridel, and staff members from all agencies and organizations operating in Regent Park. Several major accomplishments of the SDP include Regent Park Cafe and Vendors Market, an employment barriers report, and improved communications around employment services, improved relationships with community police, an asset map of youth services, 86 episodes of weekly news show in Regent Park, the development of Hello Neighbor, a mobile app providing information on the community, a report on the community spacing needs informing phases 4 and 5 of the Regent Park redevelopment, the continued support of Sunday in the Park, an annual festival celebrated in Regent Park. City announced a SDP refresh. Over the past year, the City and TCHC have significantly reduced their participation in the SDP, citing ongoing conflict, problems, and tensions. In hopes of resolving these issues, the City announced in a letter dated May 29th of 2023 their intentions to carry out a refresh of the SDP. To initiate this refresh process, the City commissioned an independent consulting group, Human Future Studios, to produce a report.
My name is John Smith. I'm Manager of Community Development for the City of Toronto.
I zoomed it out so I could see.
And this meeting tonight is to present the findings from the refresh process that has happened over the last few months. Before we get started, I'm just going to allow everybody to get a seat. I do want to bring your attention to items that are at your table. We have presentations from Human Future Studios. I believe a brief copy of their report, as well as tonight's presentation should be at your table. We also have notepads, and you should have pens at each table because we will be collecting your questions. And that's a process of, if we know many people will have questions, we want to make efficient use of your time, and we will ask you to write down your questions on the pad here. We will be providing a Q&A document after, a question and answer document after this meeting to everybody who attended. Please sign in, make sure you signed in, and actually that'll go to the wider community as well. Other things I'd like to introduce are we do have TCHC animators at some of our tables. Can they raise their hands just to show? They're all back here. Are you, after there, you will be at some tables? Okay, thank you very much. And we do have some city staff as well in attendance in supporting operation. We have, let's see. And I will be getting things started I see a few more people coming in, but we want to stick to our timeline for tonight. We know that it's been a fantastically wet day, and we want you to be able to sit down, have a meal, get this information, and then hopefully enjoy the rest of the actual sun that's come back out for the evening. I do want to announce that there is child minding, and child minding available in the adjacent room. It's just behind this room. All right, we're going to get started. So first of all, again, thank you very much. It's been a very, very dramatic day in terms of the rain, in terms of flooding in different parts of the city. But fortunately, we do have this space, and we are thankful for you to come out and to see the information that will be presented today. Again, this is a Regent Park Social Development Plan Refresh Community presentation, and we have a number of presentations for today. Next slide, please. We want to start off with the City of Toronto's land acknowledgement, so I'm going to pass it over to Richard.
We acknowledge the land that we are meeting on is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Anishinaabe. Many nations, including Mississaugas of the Credit and the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit.
And I will be doing the African ancestral acknowledgement. So the City of Toronto acknowledges all treaty peoples, including those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in generations past, and those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We pay tribute to those ancestors of African origin and descent.
So I will go over the meeting principles. In large gatherings, we know we're going to have different viewpoints and different opinions, but we're gathered here today for a presentation and an opportunity for folks to hear the result of work that's happened based on input from Regent Park community members. But we do need guidelines as we get together to ensure that we can walk through this process, and everyone will be able to be witness to the information that is put forward. So I'll start with every person has the right to equal treatment without discrimination or harassment because of one or more of the following prohibited grounds: age, ancestry, citizenship, color, creed, disability, ethnic origin, family status, gender expression, gender identity, level of literacy, marital status, place of origin, political affiliation, race, sex, including pregnancy, breastfeeding, sexual orientation. Please respect the City and TCHC, Toronto Community Housing, staff, consultants, and all the other patrons representing or attending the meeting. Failure to do so will result in you being asked to leave. We understand that some items mentioned in this presentation you may not agree with. Please refrain from speaking aloud. As the presentation is going on, a quiet room is being provided as a safe space to disengage. This is an information sharing presentation. We will not be answering questions at this time. However, there is, as I've mentioned, note takers. There are notes. You have pens at the tables. I will be taking down some questions. I think I'll ask again for TCH animators to raise their hands that will be taking notes. A Q&A document will be created after the meeting and sent out via email, not only to people in attendance here, but for others who are not here tonight. We are committed to ensuring accessibility and inclusivity. Printouts of the SDP refresh have been left on each table for you to review, as well as a presentation taking place. Child minding, as I said, is also being offered in a separate space in the building. If you or anyone else require any other accommodation during today's meeting, please let a city staff know. And I'll ask the city staff to identify themselves. They usually will have a badge like this. Okay? All right, let's go into the agenda. We're going to start with a few remarks by Councillor Moyes. I will also be asking afterwards, because we also have another guest, MPP Wong Tam. Both are versed in Regent Park and supporters of Regent Park and its development. So they will be making some brief remarks. We'll also be going into, from the City of Toronto, how did we get here? As well as we'll be inviting our colleagues, the consultants from Human Future Studios for a presentation, which will be the body of the main part of the presentation. But we will also be having an update on TCA from Toronto Community Housing, as well as some details for the SDP grant, the last round coming through, as well as some next steps, and then closing remarks. So I'll ask Councillor to come up and make some opening remarks. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here again in Regent Park. Wow, what a warm welcome. I feel wonderful all of a sudden. Again, it's been a crazy day. Eh? The weather's been crazy. We've had buckets in City Hall today. The building is literally, we've had ceiling tiles falling from the ceiling. One of my council colleagues, Councillor Cannaville, we had to actually evacuate his office because the ceiling tiles were coming down. So I'm happy this building is still intact. So again, good evening. It's great to be here. I did prepare a few notes. So 5 years ago have passed since our last SDP refresh in 2019. As we kick off the refresh, we aim to instill a heightened sense of accountability and transparency. Regent Park is a community with numerous communities within it. With this refresh, we strive for increased inclusivity, fostering an environment where everyone, including our future leaders, will feel welcome and represented. As we progress with the SDP refresh, we have learned from past experiences and looking to enhance the community experience within Regent Park as this community continues to grow and change with its revitalization. The refresh has considered best practices that have worked and identified areas needing adjustments. Today, you will see the insights and recommendations put forward by the consultant to enhance the fantastic work that has already been done and continues to be done in Regent Park. We are determined to implement transparency concerning funding allocations and ensure the community stays well informed about the process of initiatives. We aim to be responsive to the insights provided by the social, financial, and administrative, and sincerely appreciate the comprehensive report prepared by Human Future Studios, the consultants on this project. And I thank all the community members and our consultant for their contributions. It's been years in the making. I think we're in a good place. And I hope that based on the feedback we received from you, that it is reflected here in the presentation. So thank you, and I look forward to sharing this information with you this evening.
Thank you. I'll ask our MVP Wong Tam to come up and say some remarks.
Thank you so much, John, and it's actually a wonderful privilege to be with you this evening. I know it has been a bit of a wet and wild afternoon, so hopefully you and your loved ones are safe and that only drier, sunnier days are ahead of us. This is a really exciting time, I would say. And as the councillor has so eloquently noted, this has been a remarkable journey. And if I just take us back to 2007, some of you were in this community, right? Deanie's nodding. Early days when the first SDP plan was developed. And it was really front heavy with values and aspirations of what the community wanted to work on. And those 4 pillars have guided the community conversations now for years. Safety, employment, and economic development, community building, and communications. And a lot has changed since then. Half of Regent, more than half of Regent now, has been entirely rebuilt with an exciting phase 4 and 5 to come. A lot of the front end physical development has definitely taken place, and I would like to think that on the back end of it, as we finish out, and it will never be truly finished, because we know it's an evolving love. This is what it is, a love letter to the community, is that it is going to be human-centered and values-driven. Again, all the way to the very end. And the citizens, you, have been at the core of all those conversations. And so thank you to each and every single one of you for your time and energy in coming out to speaking to staff. And this is both the TCHC staff as well as the City of Toronto staff. They have done a remarkable job of working with this amazing community. I don't think they get enough praise and thank you, to be quite honest, because it has been a remarkable journey. And now that the SDP plan is being refreshed again, from 2019 now to where we are today, I want you to be proud because you have set the standard, the gold bar standard, including from our friends from Daniels who've been with this community from day one. You have set the gold bar standard also with Alexander Park and Lawrence Heights. So that is 3 massive revitalization sites that are all on that same journey. But you in Regent Park, with City of Toronto, with TCHC, have really pushed the envelope. Because I don't think that we would see, I know, we would not be seeing the SDP plans that we're seeing in those communities, Alexander Park and Lawrence Heights, without the fact that you folks did it first. So that is groundbreaking, not just for the City of Toronto, but every revitalization site as we see it across Ontario, and I believe across Canada and around the world. There is no revitalization of physical infrastructure without the social development, social inclusion piece. So thank you, really thank you for all your extraordinary work and to all the different partners that are out there. But at the core of it is thank you to you as citizens who keep coming out and keep advocating and keep pushing for better. And that's how we get better. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the next slide that you have at your table and is up here is speaking to how did we get here. And as both a councillor and our MPP have said, we got here through the wisdom, through the efforts of community members, of community partnerships, of working together. That resulted in a really community-leading approaches around participation, engagement, investment, all the way around. Hasn't been easy at times, and there's been conflicts, but the resolution is people in parks, children, youth, opportunities for the next generation, opportunities of support for existing and long-standing members, families, elders, and that's what we want to keep moving forward. We want to keep moving forward opportunities for more and more of residents and engagement and connection to more and more residents. So you've got this at the table. I'm going to just simply say, as these processes evolve, we recognize there need to be updates. Also, the social development plans as developed were developed with the intention that they were a living process. So that evolution would happen. And it needs to happen because the community is always changing. As well, there is a need. There is a need for greater participation, greater engagement, for the voices of the diverse members of Regent Park to be heard, and heard in spaces where it's not about, adversarial, but heard in spaces where they're making connections, and heard in spaces that aren't necessarily in one space. If we look around this community, there are lots of different nodes and connection points, and where we, City, TCH, and whoever else as investors, as partners, need to be coming out and making connections where people are at. So there's a need for an update, and so we started the process for that. Next slide. So I want to introduce our friends from Human Future Studios. Technically, they're consultants, but we've had some really great conversations. I know they've learned a lot from an engagement and connecting in a short time in Regent Park, and I'd like to welcome them up for their presentation.
Hi everyone, thanks for having us. Hello again. It's great to see so many familiar faces from we met over the last little while, but for those who haven't met before, my name is Victoria. These are my colleagues Ryan and Maya. We are from Human Future Studios, which is in Toronto. We're a consultancy, and we were hired by the City of Toronto to come and listen to as many people as we could in Regent Park to hear about your experiences with revitalization and hopes and wants for the next phase. So this is just an overview of how we set up the project. So in the beginning, there was conversations with the city, getting to meet the reference group and having the first meeting, getting some input from the community about who to speak to. We then went ahead and spoke to people one-on-one, as well as in group interviews, as well as walking around Regent Park and going to key places. We then went into our second meeting with the community, the reference group number 2, to get some feedback, and then finally we are here now to present some of our findings.
Okay, I'll just elaborate a bit more on how we did this. But first, I just want to mention that obviously there's something wrong with my eye, right? I had eye surgery, so I can barely see anything, which means I'm going to have to read off the page more than I'd like to. And if I should recognize you, but I don't, or if I seem awkward, it's because I can't see hardly anything, so just bear with me. Anyway, back on topic. So this is how we did it. It was kind of a short-term project. We spoke to as many people as we could in that short term. And our goal especially was to speak to persons who could speak to kind of more than one position within Regent Park or had lived in it or experienced it from kind of different angles. Most of that work involved speaking to people in 5 context labs, as we call them, which is basically a group interview, but there's a bit more to it than that. So we spoke to tenants of TCHC, we spoke to market residents, both owners and tenants. We spoke to leaders of neighborhood organizations and agencies. Of course, we spoke to SDP members, and we spoke to a large group of very engaged youth, which was especially a learning experience and awesome. And we were guided by the reference group. So the reference group was assembled Regent Park residents, agency staff, who we spoke to at the beginning and at the end of the process, and they provided some guidance and some feedback on our methods and some insights as well. So that's pretty much how we did things. So we're going to summarize. Next few slides are the insights. So it's not recommendations, it's a summary of what we were told by the diverse persons we spoke to. And we've kind of categorized these into 3 categories. So we'll run through these not too quickly, but a bit more quickly than the recommendations, and then we'll spend some more time on the recommendations afterwards. But basically, what we were told, it kind of boils down to 3 categories, and I can't actually read that, so I'm going to look at my paper. Bear with me. Okay, so first cluster, the SDP can have a bright future. We were told attempts at social inclusion cannot ignore systemic inequality, and social cohesion needs time, space, and minimal intervention. So some kind of big picture statements that we'll break down a bit, and the insights to follow. And then once we get through that, we'll go on to our recommendations, our sort of advice to the city at this point.
Please remember to write down comments or questions as they come up. So the first part of what we heard was about specifically the SDP, and we know that it can have a bright future, that there's tensions, there are some difficult issues to overcome, but that there's a lot ahead. The first point we wanted to make, the first one of our insights was that in Regent Park, the City of Toronto can be easy to see but hard to define. And what we mean by that is that we really heard people being confused about the role that the City of Toronto plays, has played in the past, and will play in the future. And that was something that we wanted to bring forward as an important issue. And you'll see when we'll talk about these insights, and then you'll see some of them reflected in the recommendations, hopefully all of them reflected in the recommendations. So this is the first one. Number two is that conflict and miscommunication have held the SDP back from its potential. So we know that the SDP has a long history, but it was quite significantly interrupted by COVID and by the lockdowns and by the difficulty of getting together in person. And we think that that is, well, we've heard that that's something that has still plagued the meetings. And we know that there's lots of misunderstanding from people who have not been part of the SDP about what it is and what it means. And that was something we also really thought was important to bring forward. Sometimes, and this is on the same point, but veering a little differently, sometimes the SDP looks closed and inaccessible. So, I'm sure this, if all of this sounds familiar to you, I think that's a good thing because it means that we've heard things correctly and we're reflecting it back. But this is a point about how many people have avoided the SDP, many people have understood that the SDP is not a place for them, and there's definitely an appetite. We were hired for the purpose of trying to diversify the voices in the SDP, get more people involved, and we're trying to kind of understand more about the issues. And one of the issues is that people have felt that you need to have some prior knowledge in order to be part of the SDP, that the SDP is a group of selected individuals as opposed to open to everybody. And those were some of the issues that we uncovered. The fourth point in this section is that now is the time to engage more residents and agency staff. So of course there's more residents who have things to say and want to say them but have not been a part of the SDP. The agency staff who we spoke to also had a lot to say and also represent a lot of the residents, or at least are able to articulate some of the problems that residents who are not part of the SDP and have not been part of the SDP have and are not able to voice. So we wanted to emphasize that the agencies have a role to play and that this would be a good time to bring them into the discussion so that they can share the benefits of their expertise and also their understanding of the community at large.
Okay, so next cluster of slides, we're aligned. Attempts at social inclusion cannot ignore systemic inequality. So that's the theme of these next four kind of insights. Summaries of things that we were told as we were doing the research about how things have gone so far. The first one, there are many communities within the Regent Park community. So, of course, one of the goals is social cohesion, and the promise of the redevelopment was a community that's unified to a large extent across some pretty big differences. But those differences still matter, of course, and people are different, and we're looking at ways that you can have like a neighborhood-based community with also kind of sub-communities in it coexisting at the same time. And it's important to not expect that this very diverse neighborhood of 10,000 or some odd people would speak with one voice, right? That's never expected of neighborhoods anywhere in the city. I don't think that's common and shouldn't be expected of Regent Park either. Next one, trauma is a barrier to participation. The crises that we're living through and that, some residents will experience more acutely can't be like separated out from the business of like building a community or like social development, right? It's that they're all kind of the same realms of experience, and we have some recommendations coming up on how to include trauma-informed practices in the SDG's work. The housing crisis is affecting tenants of all types. We heard that it's very important that TCHC tenants have a specific role and voice in the SDP. But we found, and I mean I've found from my own experience, that TCHC tenants and tenants of other types of housing, you know, might have more in common than is often presumed, right? The housing affordability crisis is affecting everyone, and you know, tenants of all types share some things in common by virtue of being tenants. But of course, TCHC versus market is a different experience as well. Last one, many live in fear of the limited good, and another kind of sign of the times, I guess, like the political currents of the past 30 years or so. Community development involves these elements of like competition, and resources are scarcer and like shorter term, and of course that has a powerful effect on what happens on the ground, despite everyone's best intentions to kind of avoid that or minimize it.
This is a set of insights that we had related to social cohesion. So inclusion was one thing that we were asked to look at, and cohesion is another. And as Ryan was saying, the expectation was that this would be a mixed neighborhood with lots of people getting along and engaging with one another. That is more complicated, more nuanced, obviously, than those early pictures or those early ideas would have suggested. One thing that we've seen, or that we were told, is that change has been the only constant. So because of the physical redevelopment and all of the changes that accompanies that, as well as social development and changes in demography over time, there has been so much upheaval in this particular community that there's been a lot of challenges with developing cohesion. Of course, Regent Park, this is idealism, scrutiny, and politics have weighed heavily on residents. Regent Park is a little bit of a fishbowl. We heard from people that there was a lot of frustration with that, and a feeling that people were focused on Regent Park in ways that perhaps they would not be on other areas of the city, that there was a real intense focus, and that was also disrupting cohesion in many ways. As I mentioned earlier, the effects of COVID and the lockdowns can't be underestimated. I think there is some emergence from that's happening, but there's still a lot of feeling that isolation was a very important and formative experience for a lot of youth especially, and now it's going to take a while to get out of that, and that has also disrupted cohesion. And this point, good space is free space. We heard so much positive, we had so many positive things about Daniel Spectrum in particular, but also spaces that are just open and free. I think part of what happened with the development, with the physical and social development, was that the norm became, you know, signing up for spaces, everything became kind of politicized, and also became more difficult to engage with. When we spoke to people about, you know, the good old days of Regent Park, they talked about a lot more casual interaction, a lot more freedom of movement, and that really helped people understand one another and come together, and that there's a lot of interest in that again, and that the space needs to be not policed and not intensely watched, but free and open for people to engage in. Now we come to the recommendations.
Yeah, so I'll just recap a little bit. So again, if anybody missed it, we are consultants who were hired by the city to speak to people in Regent Park and to advise the city on potential next steps or what to do as far as its role in the SDP. So that's kind of what we were brought in to do, and this is our suggestions based on what we were told in our research with Regent Park residents. And also to recap a bit, if you missed it, I have almost no eyesight right now, and that's why I'm awkwardly reading off the page, which I tried to avoid doing, right? Yeah, it's coming along, yeah. So our recommendations, again, 3 broad categories, and we have more specific recommendations under each that we'll spend a bit of time on in the slides ahead. So we have ideas for reframing approaches to the SDP, ideas for reworking communication within the SDP, and ideas for refreshing structures of the SDP. And again, this is our sort of advice or set of suggestions to the city as for what the city can do within the SDP. Again, some of these will sound a bit similar to the insights that we presented before, because the point, of course, was to find out how things have gone and then suggest ways of doing it better. So you're going to see some of the same themes coming up, right? First one, our advice to the city, embrace the reality of multiple communities within the Regent Park community. And we think we could reframe this place as a neighborhood with multiple communities within it, right? Of course, Regent Park still matters, and the goal of building some kind of unity across a neighborhood is a laudable goal, right? But you can't expect 10,000 people or more to all be on the same page about everything, and there's differences that matter and should be acknowledged and celebrated that exist in any neighborhood, including Regent Park. There's some more details in the package that you received in advance, and I think there's one copy on each table. We had some suggestions for exploring alternatives to the consensus model that the SDP has been operating with, kind of along these lines. We think the city could stand to clarify its roles and then keep clarifying its role in the process, right? One of the insights that we mentioned earlier on was, of course, the city has some kind of a role in this thing. It's like a form of government. It has some power over something, but the roles of specific staff or departments are also unclear, and we're advising the city to be completely transparent and upfront about that, and to sort of reiterate that as the process continues. And also to explain sort of step by step who makes key decisions and upon what basis, right? How they decide. Third point, we're also calling for a needs assessment of everyone who lives in the Regent Park footprint. So TCHC tenants, market tenants, residents of all types, like we mentioned in the insights, the housing affordability crisis and the other kind of hard times that we're all living through, they don't affect everybody the same way, but arguably they're touching everybody in Regent Park to at least some extent, right? And as far as planning next steps, there's a lot of needs that aren't quite known, so we're recommending the city starts with a detailed needs assessment of everyone who lives in the footprint.
Number 4, break the listserv. This is actually meant, this section is reworking communication within the SDP. So all of these are focused on modes of communication, which we heard were not working well and needed to be reformed. So breaking the listserv. Our recommendation here is to stop using the same method of reaching out, of outreach, that has been currently used or that's been used in the past few years, and that's because there's not enough people who are understanding that the SDP is also for them and spaces for them to share their voice. So recruitment can be achieved among groups that the City of Toronto is mandated to serve if there is more outreach that is more creative, and we thought that, again, we have some very more specific recommendations in the longer form of this, but the city being present at formal and informal spaces of Regent Park, all of the great festivals that we heard about, this is, I think, a really nice way to engage with community members who are coming out because they're interested, because they love the community, but not necessarily understanding what's going on in the SDP. Those are opportunities there. Number 5, drop the formality. So again, we heard from people that their best memories of Regent Park were informal get-togethers, ways that people talked politics, talked policy, talked about all the interesting things that they wanted to do, new committees, new things that they wanted to organize when they were just bumping into one another on the street or hanging out at barbecues, and we think there should be more of that. Fun and informal points of entry into the SDPs. The SDP now is, I think from the perspective of people who don't know very much about it, a very formal space and a very difficult space to enter. And we're recommending that get reformed a little bit so that people can understand that it can be a place of enjoyment as well. And on the same topic that we mentioned about the free space, or good spaces, free space, to preserve and expand public spaces that are not over-policed, that promote free-flowing interaction and engagement. Number 6, help people feel heard. We definitely heard from people that they were not feeling heard, and that mostly this happens because action is not happening, that the action would indicate that they had been heard in the first place. This isn't always possible, and we know that the kind of bureaucratic process that has to be run through by people who work at the City of Toronto and other political agents sometimes gets in the way of getting things done really quickly and right away, but keeping people on top of, or keeping people aware of those processes and how they're going along is a way to help people feel heard and people understand that their comments have not just gone out into the air. Also, there needs to be training and for facilitation skills to SDP members in titled positions. Another reason people are not feeling heard is because there is tension in the SDP and in the meetings, and they are feeling shut down and they're feeling unaccepted, and that has to be changed as well. Create spaces, sorry, just one more, adjacent to main meeting spaces for sidebar conversations and informal discussions. We witnessed some really amazing informal discussions that happened when we met with the reference group. And this started new relationships and new engagements and new connections and new networks, and that just seemed like something that could happen more often. Okay, so the third section is refreshing the structure of the SDP. And sorry, the first one is also a little bit related to communications, which is to use trauma-informed practices. So there's specialists, of course, who work in this area and who understand how meetings can be trauma-informed and interactions can better address the trauma that people are bringing with them and carrying with them. Number 8 is to decentralize power. So we talked about how there are multiple communities within the Regent Park community. We're not just talking about ethnic, national communities. We're talking about affinity groups, people who share things in common because they are mothers of young children, or because they're pet owners, or because they are part of the LGBTQ community, or because they have other things that they want to engage with and that are important to them. And those are communities as well. And we know that all the people in this room are part of multiple communities at once. And we thought that these were smaller groups that should be accommodated and should be understood as communities in and of themselves. Number 9, focus on facilitation and evaluation. So another comment on meetings being facilitated, perhaps by people who are at arm's length, who are professionals in this area. And a clear and consistent accountability framework. So when things are going to happen, how people will know that things are happening, how people will know the timeline for when things are happening. And related to this, there's agency expertise and experience that's out there that we've understood could really, is not being utilized in the way that it could be. So connect with SDP affinity groups, to connect the SDP affinity groups who we were mentioning before, the smaller micro groups, micro communities, to agency partners who have similar interests and mandates. So for example, if it's a health related issue, then there's the community health center. If it is it's evaluation of programs, then YSM has experience in there, and there's so many other agencies that will have connections to different needs. Number 11, make meetings matter. This came out loud and clear that people want to go to meetings when they believe things are happening, when they believe decisions are being made, and not to feel as though they're arriving at some cost to themselves. Maybe they're getting people to take care of their children, maybe they're missing important things, time with their family. People want to feel like when they go to meetings, it's going to mean something. So organize meetings around the opportunity to dialogue with key decision makers, and there's lots of ways that this could be done, maybe with certain key decision makers coming at regular intervals and working toward that. Number 12 is harness the word of mouth. We know that Regent Park is a place where people talk, and people have really good close relationships. We've seen with the TCHC animators that this can extend way outside of this room and the people who are in this room, and we thought that that could be better used and better leveraged. So reaching unengaged people who don't know about the SDP or people who have misconceptions about the SDP can happen if there are people who are chosen for their connections to those various communities, and we've seen this work nicely with the animators. Last point, do you want to finish?
So just to recap, this presentation was based off what we learned over the last couple of months by speaking with everyone in the community. And of course, we hope that this conversation continues. We were only here for a short time, and there's lots of things that are going to continue happening within the community, so we hope that the discussion and dialogue continues on, and that our recommendations are revisited, and updated as it needs to serve the community, which is the ultimate goal.
So thank you very much to our consultant partners, and I will say, I know it's been a short but quick time. Don't be strangers. We will seek out conversations and opportunities to include you in future opportunities for community conversations, and I think the key is dialogue. The key is creating the opportunity for dialogue to happen in many different spaces, many different places, with folks that are comfortable in different types of environments. And that means out in the parks, out in different community spaces, in the recreation spaces, in the social and the health spaces, in the employment and the marketplace as well. To have those dialogues and be consistent with that and have a way of sharing that information on a regular basis. There are a number of recommendations that are here. There are actions that the city will be working with TCH, Toronto Community Housing, and other community partners and residents to move forward based on this. But there will be opportunities for dialogue as well. Whether it's a speak out, whether it's small groups discussions, whether it's with whether it's with youth groups, whether it's with grassroots groups, and groups that haven't necessarily felt their voices heard, we will be committing to reaching out and making those connections. I'm going to ask Richard to come up and identify a number of key areas that we've highlighted for today, but there is going to be a more comprehensive plan that is put together and shared with the community of those opportunities and opportunities to continue to collaborate.
Awesome, thank you, John. So these are some of the recommendations or city actions that we can kind of start now. As in start now would be September in fall. So some of the recommendations I'll go over quickly again. Embrace the reality of multiple communities within the Regent Park community. Clarify your role and priorities. Assess the needs of everyone. Some of the city actions that we'll take over the next little bit will be the city will lead a Regent Park community engagement strategy with the Regent Park community. So that's in collaboration. The majority of the stuff will be obviously in collaboration with the community. City will lead a needs assessment process for Regent Park as outlined from the consultants as well. And this is refresh recommendations too. Reworking how you can communicate with the SDP. So recommendations was break the listserv, drop the formality, help people feel heard, and use trauma-informed practices. So some of those city actions, city will lead communications and engagement process for Regent Park. City will work with TCHC to support an expanded animators or ambassador program. We've seen that work across Regent Park, but we've also seen it largely work across the city when we did the COVID-19 ambassador program, which got to places that the city and other agencies just really couldn't get to. Looking at the city will select and train community ambassadors to support this piece. Also look at training opportunities for mental health first aid, facilitation, and conflict resolution. Next slide. And then the refresh recommendations, number 3, refreshing the structure of the SDP. Recommendations were decentralizing power, focus on facilitation and evaluation, lean on agency expertise and experience, and also making meetings matter. And also, the last piece is harnessing word of mouth. So some of the city actions, city will engage in local groups such as youth safety, employment, indigenous, grassroots groups, food security, and entrepreneurs. And there will be a bunch other, but these are the ones that we've kind of just identified now. The city will co-create community collaboration events for local leaders. Also, the city will co-create partnership protocols with agency partners. So that's sitting with the executive directors, Regent Park executive directors table, and chatting with them about what the roles of agency staff are within the SDP. So, city's response to the recommendations, design and implement a needs assessment process, create city-supported ambassador recruitment and training, communication and engagement plan, and then this is all going to be beginning this fall. The city will resume the refresh reference group to begin the following actions that I just mentioned.
Thanks, Richard. And I want to say before introducing Teresa and TCH community, work takes time, It takes time for folks to be involved and be connected. And I always recognize that although some people may be in the know, we can never guarantee that everybody's in the know, so we have to consistently work on that and make connections. And so that work will begin in collaboration, but there is a need for clear ideas and clear communication in the response to the recommendations. And the onus is, and I'm taking responsibility with that, with TCH and the city, and that means other city services and city partners being involved in that to work for the betterment of the residents of and community groups in Regent Park. But I have to say that a lot of work has been done so far, a lot of great work, and results you actually see across the community. And I'm going to invite Teresa up to speak of a number of things that are happening in terms of community benefit.
You weren't brave enough to pronounce my last name, so we work on that. And not only that, you also stole a little bit of my intro, so thanks, John. I think, great minds. But you can move to the next slide, thank you. And I think exactly to John's point, and picking up from that, work takes a lot of time, and that is, I think, quite evident from the third timeline of this evening that I'm about to present to you. But we also, at the same time, we don't want to assume that everyone is coming in from a space that you know exactly what is happening, what the process is, what does it mean for you personally and for your community. So I'll just very briefly go through what the community process has been so far. It started back in 2020 with the developer selection process for phases 4 and 5, and Tridel's commitment for $26.8 million for direct investments into the Regent Park community. From there, we've been working with residents to co-design a 3-phase engagement process. And as you can see, it did take us a long time to figure out exactly how to do this in the right way that brings in everyone into the fold, or as many people as we could possibly reach. So within that, we looked at what the SDP told us and what residents told us, and that is the investments would primarily go towards 3 main buckets: employment, major investments into community spaces, for example, and ongoing local granting, because we know that's really important in the community as well. From there, we went out and we door knocked as many doors as we could. We stood on corners talking to people. We came to events, we held events, we made phone calls, we made surveys, we used Regent Park TV. We used a lot of effort and methods that were available to us, and that actually gave us over 1,000 responses to our survey, which is one of the largest ones we've ever had in this community. And from there, we worked on putting that into tangible investments that the community can benefit from. So as I mentioned, this was our listening to community stage. It just has a little bit more detail. I won't go into it because I think we're over time anyway. So John's like, yeah, keep going. But what the main thing I want to focus on is how did we look through these over 1,000 responses and bring them together into something that you can understand, something that we can understand, that we can invest in as well. And very grateful for all the help that YSM and our advisory group provided into creating and identifying what the key investment priorities are for the community based on what you told us. So employment, training, scholarship and bursaries, youth-focused programs in space, and community space. So hoping no surprises there on that list. If you can move forward. So from there, we have our priorities, but how much do we put in? We we didn't necessarily know all the nooks and crannies of what does it cost to have a accessible space for the community? What does it cost to operate the space for the community? How long could we operate it with the money that we have? Or how many scholarships are too many scholarships or not enough as we move forward? So those conversations were really productive in terms of getting our advisory group together to help us navigate the creation of 3 options that will be brought forward to the community later on this fall. And that brings me to my next slide. We will be undergoing the first ever community benefits vote in North America. This is one of the largest community engagement processes around community benefits, and so when I said the work takes time, that's why I said it. We want to make sure that we get this right, that everyone, as much in the community as we possibly can, hears community benefits and knows what community benefits is and why they need to know about it and why does it matter for the long term as well. So we're very excited to start this process later this year. It will probably take us into a little bit of 2025, but we hope that we can very shortly celebrate the final selection of what those investments look like. And to go along with that, we will be very frequently coming back to the community and reporting back on how these investments are doing and what are the impacts of those investments. So we look forward to your involvement, to your feedback, and most importantly, to your vote for your preferred community benefits package later this year. Thank you.
So thank you, Teresa Tarova. Almost there. Try. So follow-up is really important. Accountability is really important. Actually having an opportunity to further have your voice or your vote counted in terms of the options going forward. These are all processes that are a result of greater partnerships. And I believe that, and it's been said before, Regent Park is a lead in that process. There is this area, before I go into this area, on behalf of our community funding unit, I do want to introduce, I believe she's at the back, wave your hand, our staff from community funding. Shout out your name.
Hi, I'm Tiara. It's nice to meet many of you. A few of you may have seen my emails within the last few weeks as we are wrapping up the 2022-2023 SDP. So some of you may have received an email from me just following up on the final report. But again, thank you for having me in this space today. I'm sure that I will have an opportunity to formally introduce myself, but I am a part of the community funding unit, and I am the agency review officer that will be supporting the social development plan grant that we are looking to launch fairly soon. So I will turn it back over to you now.
All right, just putting you on a little bit of spotlight, Dira. So Dira, some of you may have been in contact with, if you're grant recipients for the Social Development Plan grant. Oleg was a former, or the agency review officer you may have been connecting with, and now it is Diera. So Diera will be following up, as Oleg has been following up, with all recipients of the grant, because the grant does have a reporting process. All groups that were granted are required to actually update the grant and report back. Now, we've gone through 4 rounds or had 4 rounds donate or identified through this SDP grant. The final round is happening, and this is the date process. So there are, for the 2024 SDP grant initiatives, there will be, these are the key dates that we have here. The engagement sessions that will be happening all the way through to August 13th. grant launch in September, information sessions as well. Grant deadline is October 29th, and the application review October, November. Announcements as well will happen in late November, and project implementation will happen beginning in December all the way through to 2025. We recognize, though, the reality of some of the grants that have been invested in the past, that they have taken a little bit longer. But we are committed to the accountability of all the grants that have been invested and having a full accounting of the social development plan grants from start to finish, all now including this round, all grants and all recipients, and will be providing that report back to community, and we'll be inviting grant recipients from the entire process to actually present on their findings to community. Now this can happen in a number of different ways, and that means we need to look at the ways to do that, whether it's in a larger forum or smaller forum areas, or a actual report that will be shared out to community. But it is about ensuring that there is awareness and there is accountability of these investments and where the investments have gone and what is the result of the investments.
Yes.
And as Teresa has spoken of, I mean, it's the same process that we want to guide the community benefits process. When there are investments in Regent Park, the investments are accountable not only to the city, not only to TCH, but more specifically to all of the residents of Regent Park, and really to the residents that the investments were intended for in the beginning. And I do have to say, the intention was for TCH tenants to be benefiting from those investments. So this is a process that is ongoing. It's a learning process, but we are going to be reinforcing the accountability throughout that, especially as we reach the close of this process, as well as beginning the CBA process as well. Next slide. For tonight, I do want to, again, say, we do want to collect the questions that you may have written down, and we want to be able to share that, not only if you signed up today at the front, but also with the larger community. And as a practice, whatever happens in meetings should be shared with the larger community, from the questions that are put forward to the ideas that are put forward. The presentation of the report, the refresh report, has gone out and will probably go out again a couple more times, because we want to ensure there is as much understanding and awareness that a refresh process has happened, and there are going to be some clear actions as a result of that process. And that includes, moving forward, the next steps, as I mentioned, grant information meetings coming up in August, grant process launch August to October, as well as the implementation of the refresh process. From sharing of your questions with the answers that we can answer in a document that's available, also sharing the refresh report, and I think that needs to be shared all the way through the process, because I think it's been said, not everybody knows the story of that process, and we need to ensure more of Regent Park residents and groups understand that process. And, of course, beginning actions. And actions that need to be accountable, just as actions are an investment as well. So there needs to be accountability all the way through. These are the commitments that you've heard here tonight. Tonight will not be the only time you hear them. We will be looking at re-engaging all the way through this process, as Richard has said, throughout the fall to begin with. But it will mean more people are connected and more people are engaged through this process. That's the goal. Whether it's surveys, whether it's speak-outs, whether it's small groups discussions, the emphasis is going to be on making connections to folks where they're comfortable and where they're connected. So, in closing, I do want to say you've taken your time away from your families, from your schedules, from your work, to come here tonight. We do want to express a thank you to all of you who have come out, and we want to create, again, more opportunities for discourse as we move forward. Fortunately, the sun is still out, and there's still opportunities for folks to get out and enjoy, it's Regent Park, so the parks, the spaces, the people, the business, all of that type of stuff. We do want to express a heartfelt thanks to all the community animators that have come out, to our distinguished representatives, Councillor Moise, as well as MPP Wong Tam, to our consultants who have come out, and to the City and TCH staff. But most importantly, the thanks always goes out to Regent Park residents. This is your community, these are your spaces, and we look forward to working with you in collaboration to expand the opportunities in Regent Park. Thank you very much, and good night.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please follow our social media platforms. And for more information, please visit our website.